Um,
Beth, would it be all right if I introduced you?
yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Excellent. So, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Beth Jennings, who you should see on your screen. Beth is currently a research manager at We Protect Global Alliance, which is a global organization dedicated to ending the sexual exploitation and abuse of children online. Um, Many of you may know her as interim executive director and research and program coordinator at Children in All Policies 2030, where she made many, many contributions to our mission and helped us get where we are today with the EPIC program. Among many achievements, she helped set up and run our youth advisory board. She conducted participatory research activities with children on harmful commercial marketing and other topics. She wrote our safeguarding policy. She engaged and maintained good relationships with our many stakeholders, and she contributed to scholarly and policy focused publications. In terms of her academic background, Beth has a PhD in social work, and she has worked extensively across the areas of child protection, homelessness, sexual violence and exploitation, holistic services, and participation both as a social worker and a researcher. These are just a few of Beth's accomplishments, and we are so excited to hear from her and learn from her today. So, Beth, if there's anything you'd like to add about your background, but otherwise, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was a very generous introduction. I think really what's brought me to this point, and in terms of really being passionate about lived experience and child participation, is that background that I worked with young people as a social worker, and I went into to research, as many of us do, to really impact policy and practice. And I think, as I hope we agree, having children at the heart of that is essential to what we do. Um, just that I do currently work in sexual violence and abuse of children. This is a difficult topic. I'm not going to be talking about it in detail for this particular seminar, but just as a warning that I know that impacts many of us. So that will just be touched upon in the context of my professional experience. Um, so when we think about, sorry, now I just need to change. There we go. Okay, great. Can everyone see my slides? Okay,
Yeah.
great. So when we think about child participation, I think it's helpful to take a bit of a step back and think about it in the context of how we understand knowledge and the knowledge we use, and specifically the knowledge we use for social change. And a colleague from Together Girls wrote a really interesting blog. I'd encourage you to read it in the context of violence prevention. And she has quite a unique background as being a survivor of violence, as well as a counselor and a researcher. So she stepped into these three sort of types of knowledge that she put together as a triad of things that we really need to understand if we're going to bring about impactful, effective social change. So there's the one that we're mostly familiar with, the scientific evidence. This is essential, as we all know. It helps us understand what works, it brings clarity and accountability. There's then that practice-based knowledge, which we'll just touch upon, we won't talk about in detail, that gives that deep understanding of the complexities of how systems work and the problems in them. And then where we are today, what we're talking about today is lived experiences. And this is really an essential part of this knowledge understanding. It reveals gaps, it challenges assumptions, It makes solutions more relevant and crucially just. We know we don't want to just do things for people. We want to do things with people. And so an example from my own experience, I worked for a consortium of researchers around autism, and there was a real lack of understanding of the social aspects of autism. So it was a lot of the research was very, scientific, and uh, in quite a closed and not expansive way. And it was members of the autism community that really challenged this, and they challenged the priorities of research, the medicalization of their lived experience, and brought about a more social understanding and more concentration on their needs, and the services that they required. Um, and there's many, we can look at many aspects of research and science and social issues, uh, where lived experience has really shined a light on the gaps, and the assumptions and the prejudices that we have. Um, and then, of course, we all work in the child rights space. We know that child participation in particular is enshrined in international law, that children have the right to express themselves, and not just the right to express themselves, but this right, they need to be listened to and given due weight. Their views need to be given due weight. And there's an understanding that this leads to better decisions and empowerment. This should be a positive experience for the young people, the children involved. Um, and it should be included in all matters that affect them. And also there's an understanding of that children have different needs according to their age. They also have a right to protection. And so we understand where they sit as children within this, within their sort of participation. I think also, just from when thinking of that context of knowledge, we also understand that these different forms of knowledge don't sit alone, they all interconnect. So children will be involved in research. They Practitioners will be involved in practice, and children will be impacted by research. So all these things talk to each other as well, as they should. Um, Now I know we have a lot of great experience in this room. So I wondered if we could just have a few minutes, and just unmute yourself, um, if you would like to share an example of child participation and action, and specifically, how did it really impact the other forms of knowledge? What sort of lights did it shine, in terms of understanding of the issue? Um,
I would like to invite our colleagues from Argentina, if they want to make a comment in Spanish, they are of course invited. Si ustedes quieren hacer un comentario sobre algún ejemplo sobre participación y acción y cómo lo que ven acá en pantalla, la vida de los chicos y las experiencias eh, complementan otras formas de conocimiento. Así que la pueden hacer en castellano, como ustedes quieren, y tienen el traductor, la gente que habla en inglés.
Maybe I'll start just to get give people a chance to reflect. I know Kwame is here from CLCD Ghana and can give a real life example of children's participation in policymaking. I thought I would briefly mention work, Beth, that you and I conducted together on harmful commercial marketing, we were writing a report about how marketing affects children and what strategies can be used to combat harmful marketing. And we engaged a group of young people, I think aged 13 to 18. And we talked about how marketing affects them. And some of the quotes that Beth captured in the focus group interviews, I still use in presentations because they really expanded how we viewed the actual problem of marketing. For instance, we were looking at industries like tobacco, alcohol, sugar sweetened beverages, and how they market to children. But the children also mentioned things like the beauty industry and skin whitening creams and nutritional supplements, things like that, and how the impact was on their physical health, but also very strong on their mental health. And so it led us to redefine and reconceptualize the problem in a way that, we were working with lots of adult experts from WHO, from UNICEF, but speaking with the children actually led us to expand our vision of the problem, and they provided more far-reaching solutions. Their policy ideas went further than the adults' ideas. So that was very enlightening for me. And yeah, it was a great experience. Over.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I think that's a great example. Um, do any of our colleagues from Kenya want to share your example before we move to the next
There's
slide?
one in the chat. I wonder if
I
a
can.
Spanish speaker
Yes,
translate that into
this
English.
is a contribution from Daniel
Mhm.
Manukian, who is based in Neuquén province, and he says that he always remembers an experience of more than 20 years ago in a little town of 3,000 inhabitants, Huecu is the name of this town in Neuquén province, where they implemented participatory budget, and they gave space for the children to make their proposals. And the results of this exercise was the installation of a carousel in the town. That this is something that was there was not before. So it was a process of giving space for children to participate and to listen their voices seriously. Gracias, Daniel.
Brilliant. Thank you. Carlos, you have your hand up?
Yeah, hi, Bethany. I just want to
Hi.
share kind of like something more mundane because sometimes we
Mm.
try to think of these things always in policy and all this kind of
Yeah.
complicated lifestyle, life situation, but simple things. I mean, I remember once meeting up with my nephews, and my sister-in-law used to always characterize them as like, oh, my children are really picky eaters, and they're really difficult to feed, etc. So they had to stay with me. And I remember sitting down with them and just planning what to eat. And I remember saying to them, but let's put colors in the table. So what should we eat? And tell me, how do you like this? And we were taking decisions together. And I remember my sister-in-law coming later on for dinner, and she was amazed of how much food they were eating and how happily they were eating all the veg, etc., etc. And for me, I think it's a reflection of the small. It reflects on the large. It's about how connected we are with the children or how disconnected we are.
Mhm.
Over.
Yeah, no, I think that's a brilliant example. I think it really speaks to all aspects of our lives, doesn't it? That it's a principle of listening to the people that are most affected by the issues that we're trying to address. So thank you. Um, so now just thinking of some of the frameworks that we use in terms of understanding child participation and sort of where our activities fit. And so this it's probably something that you're familiar with, Hart's ladder of participation. And it really, I think it highlights the power relationship between the child involved or the children involved and the adults involved. So At the bottom, we've got manipulation, where it's basically adults are setting the agenda, not really listening to children, just pretending they are. And to the sort of top, where it's the children that are sharing decisions with adults. And you have that interesting sort of tier just below, where they're youth initiated and directed, but don't have the adult involvement. So I think it's a really useful way of looking at where power sits and within the activities, and how we interact with children. I think there's a few things that are important to say. This isn't a ladder that we climb up, as in we never want to be manipulating children, right? So it's not that we start somewhere and end up the top. It's also not always appropriate for us to. It's not that ring 8 is the only appropriate way that we work with children or consult children. We have to understand the resources and the activities that we're involved in, what we're trying to achieve, and then plan it accordingly. But I think this is a useful way of us conceptualizing, well, what are we doing? Are we consulting children here, or is this more of a co-led initiative? And also, thinking of the sort of ethical issues in terms of it's the bottom is an unethical way of working, right? We don't ever want to be in a situation where what the activities we are doing is our manipulation. But then we also don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So we want to make sure that we start somewhere, that there's basic principles in place that we're working towards, and we'll talk a bit about those. But even if it is a one-off consultation that is meaningful, informed, and safe, that is better than no participation at all. And then onto the Lundy model, which I think again many of you will be familiar with, but is a very helpful tool when we think about meaningful and ethical participation of children. And so she has these 4 spaces, and we'll go through each of them. So there's space, making space for children to be that is safe, and they're a space where they can express their views. There's voice. Those views are given in an informed way. They know what they're talking to, and they're given that they're allowed to speak, and that is being communicated. There's the audience, so who's listening to them, who is hearing. And then there's the influence. Where are those views going? What is being done with those? And this is going to look different. I think this is why it's been such a popular model used and very successful, because it can be used for many different situations. It can be used for research. It can be used for policy creation. It can be used for practice design. It's because the principles remain the same, the activities may look very different. So if we just go into a few go through them, and I've got a page of resources that have links, and one of them is sort of a checklist based on the Lundy model, which was really helpful, a very practical tool. So firstly, we are talking about children, and particularly for children. I mean, we want to keep everyone safe, but particularly for children, we have a duty to keep them safe and ensure they're in safe spaces. So we do need safeguarding policies. We need to think through the implications of if a child reveals they are in an unsafe situation. We also need to think about the space we're creating and how we're ensuring that it is safe. And I'm very aware that safeguarding looks different in different contexts, but there has to be that sort of minimal standard of we've got something in place. We would know how we're going to respond. We know we have thought through the risks, and we thought through how we're going to ensure that the children, that we do no harm to the children that we come in contact with. And again, in the resources, there's a link to a resource that talks about safeguarding policies, and so creating them. Are the space, is this space accessible? Is it inclusive? Again, we are not going to be able to cover every child, and there are times when there's resource restrictions that that impact the decisions we make. But at the same time, we should be actively considering who are we including, who are we excluding, how are we ensuring that this is a accessible and inclusive space. And then really thinking about the resources we use and the types of communication. Is it child friendly? Is it age appropriate? And there's lots of overlaps with voice and space, but making sure that what the children want to say, they are able to say in a way that is relevant to them. So they know what's happening, they understand the project, they have the tools, they're given tools to express how they need to express their views. Very, obviously informed consent is crucial. The informed part of that is the part we really need to dig into, because we need it's that making sure that children do understand what they're involved in. And then the role of the caregiver is also something that's very important. We're talking about children. Children are there is a caregiver who has the main responsibility for keeping them safe, and they should be included and understand what's happening. This obviously there's younger children, that's more so. You can sort of debate when they get closer to 18 what that looks like, but that is the principle in place. And something I really learned, I think, from the Youth Advisory Board was the importance of different methods of communication. So some young people, and these were all, they were all sort of slightly older. The youngest was 13, and very articulate young people, but some preferred to write comments, others preferred verbal communications, so it's really important to think about how we allow and enable children to voice their views, and that this is in a way that they're comfortable with and suits them best. And obviously for age comes into that, and age appropriateness. And then I think this is often where we start to have difficulty. The audience, who are we communicating to? This needs to be known. We need to plan accordingly, and children need to know who they're talking to as well. And does that person, and this goes into the influence, do the people with have the power to bring about the change that children want or are expressing? So it's also really important not to overpromise, not to be clear in our communication about what the task is. So if it's research that we hope will influence policymakers, that's what we say. We don't say that it's going to. We say that this is something that can inform them. And then the crucial thing about making sure that we are actually portraying what the children are telling us faithfully. And that's, I think, sounds very simple, but it's very easy to put our interpretations. And so being, really vigilant about ensuring that we're not over interpreting or deciding that children are saying things that they might not be. I think the other really important thing to say here is that we know that children are not a homogenous group. We're not trying to say that. We're not trying to say that all children have this opinion. So being very clear about how we portray what we are saying, and putting it in the right context. And then influence. So are children's views being taken seriously, essentially? Are there, and I also appreciate that sometimes this is taken out of our hands in terms of who we're trying to influence, but that we're portraying it in a way that portrays that seriousness, that we are putting it towards the right people who can make change, that it's not just an exercise that we do to tick a box. And I think it's also really, really good practice to, whenever we can, feed back to the children involved how their participation has been used, how has their time and energy, where has that gone, how's it been used, what difference has it made. I think it's also a common misperception that it's sort of it's scientific in that we're saying this is true and therefore this is what has to be done. We understand there are constraints, that just because a child has said something, that doesn't mean that that's what has to happen. There's complexities, but that it's about putting across what they've said in an ethical and serious way, and then ensuring it gets to the right people, and that is part of the decision-making process. So I'm just going to give you a few examples from my own experience. I think it'd be great to have time for us to sort of reflect on our plans and discuss those. But yeah, just some practical experience. So in my current role, we are working towards our vision is to have a safe digital life for children. And so we worked with, and it was mostly my colleagues who led it, but bringing together young people from all over the world. We worked through youth organizations. There were about 100 young people involved from over 10 countries, and all through to ensure it's safe, and the space was somewhere that young people felt comfortable and safe. We did it through all these different organizations. There were about seven youth organizations involved, to just look at, well, what do you want a safe internet to look like? What do you want the digital world to look like? So we had these consultations through these groups, and then we had, from each of the groups, we had youth leaders. So there were about 10 leaders who then analysed that together and came up with this manifesto, as well as other sort of products that they wanted to get out there, that said, well, this is what they want their digital life to look like. And I think it was important for us as an organization, because if we've got a vision to achieve something, that has to be rooted in the lived experiences of the children that we are working for. And it was really interesting in this sort of this world and this debate. There's a lot about privacy versus safety, and there was a real understanding of that. Children sort of understood a lot of those nuances. But there were, clear red lines of what they wanted their world to look like. And also the whole, we know that for young people, there's not a clear distinction often between the physical world and the online world. That's very much a blurred reality. So this is an example of something that was co-produced and co-led. Every 2 years we do a global threat assessment that brings together the latest evidence that we have on this subject, specifically on child abuse online. So what do we know? What's the latest evidence? What's the latest research? This last year we worked with Columbia University on this. So and it's for largely it's for anyone, but largely for our membership, which involves governments, technology companies, and civil society globally. So this is something that it's not for children. It's got a very sort of specific mandate. But we obviously wanted to involve children and their views. So we worked with our colleagues who had worked on this manifesto to include, first of all, include that as a sort of scene set of this is what children want. But then also sort of match what their concerns and what things they brought up with the latest research, and look at, so this, the obvious, I'll take an obvious one. AI is a big issue at the moment, and this is what young people have said about it. So trying to bring children's voices into what we understand, and then as part of this year's report, we the research team at Columbia University created this this prevention framework. And so we wanted specifically to have input on this. So we worked with an organization that works with digital creators globally. So young people who are very involved in this type of work, that have interest in it, but are globally representative. And so they were part of a process. So the initial drafts came from the research, and then we had those reviewed by experts in the field, and a group of those experts were children themselves and young people themselves. So that was very much a consultative process. So in this larger project, we had different ways that children were involved. And we also wanted, this report, it's an 80-page report. Very few children are going to ever want to read that. And they're not the primary audience either. So, but we wanted, they had been involved, and we wanted something that sort of fed back what they had been saying to us, what the research is telling us. So we did these sort of explainers. One about the report in general, and because AI was an issue that lots of young people were interested in, we also did one for AI. So this was then a way of sort of feeding back what had been done and what had been found. And they were also reviewed by a group of young people as well, who gave really important insight. I think for the framework, some of the things that really came out were children really wanting those diverse voices, but also wanting safe spaces to go to. They felt that punitive sort of messaging really often puts young people off, and actually having spaces where they could talk to safe adults about their concerns came up really strongly, and you see that reflected in the framework. And so I'm just using this as an example of a sort of larger project that then used different ways of young people being involved. And it's in no way perfect. There's lots of things we would have liked to do differently. So, I mean, if we had had time and budget, one of our ideas was actually having a chapter. Yes, the whole report. It probably wasn't appropriate for young people to lead on it, but maybe we could have a chapter that was led by children themselves. So there are definitely different things that we could have done. But this is what we could do in reality, and it ensured that children's voices were included. And this I only added it just last minute, but I was reading through our article that was published in and where was it published? Health
Promotion International.
That's right. Thank you, Sarah. Um, and this is a table from it that looks at our youth advisory board and all the different ways that they were involved in our projects. And it's I think again we were learning. It wasn't a perfect system, but you can really see how they influenced our work. And I think anyone who sort of came in contact with them would agree that they really challenged a lot of our views and really enriched the work that we did. And then these are just a few other examples. I think the really exciting thing is there's so many examples all over the world. And it's really fun to look at them actually. But I just chose a few to show sort of different places and different methods. So in Malta, children were asked about inclusion and how to make a more positive school environment, and that was actually included in national education policy. In Scotland, there was actually a position formed and created from specific youth recommendation. Not to go into the weeds, but here local services, the local authority that run sort of the social services and the health authority are separate and often not talking as well to each other as they should. And this was seen as a real gap, and so a joint position was formed to fill this gap. And then in South Korea, with younger children, there was participatory mapping of road safety, and this was used to change road policy. So I think you can see that there's just such a wide range of ways that children's voices can have such a positive impact. And these are just a few examples. Sorry, I just realized I haven't been following the chat. I think there's been so yeah. Should we come to those later, Sarah, or
Yes, I think there's some in Spanish and there's some resources that have been shared.
Okay,
But maybe
great.
we can come back to it at the discussion section.
Brilliant. Okay, that's great. And then this is just a resource list. I think everyone will get the PowerPoint presentation, will they, Sarah? So yeah, so it's different links that yeah sort of speak to the everything that I've been presenting. Great. So thank you. If we could, I think we have about 15 minutes to discuss to have a discussion about sort of your plans and whether there are any specific blockers, how might these be overcome? So I thought it might be, because I know everyone's at sort of different stages, but it might be helpful to think of it in terms the Lundy model, so space, voice, audience, and influence. What aspects could be strengthened to ensure meaningful participation, looking at it through this model's lens. For example, is how are you ensuring that what you're doing is going to a specific audience? Is that being being communicated to children? Any area. That was just a throwaway example, but yeah. So where are there areas that you feel you need to discuss further in terms of the plans, and then what are the key blockers and how could these be overcome? Um, Sarah, is it best to have like just an open discussion? I'll stop sharing so we can all see each other. Yeah.
Thank you, Beth, for that wonderful
Sorry.
presentation. No, I was just saying thank you. It really provided a lot of basics and frameworks to think about how to engage with children ethically and effectively, and also for me, the range of possible approaches. There's not one methodology for doing it. It's really about finding I think, if I understood your presentation correctly, about what is appropriate for your context, for what you're trying to achieve. So I think it was really, really helpful and interesting.
Thank you. Should I put the questions in the chat so we all have them? I'm also happy to answer any questions if, yeah.
I see that Danielle put something in the chat. Raul, were you going to respond to that or were you going to say something else?
Let's go to Danielle's comment.
So can you explain? Yes, Danielle, if you set your speaking language to Spanish, when you speak in Spanish, those who want to hear it in English will hear it in English.
Daniel, si querés hablar en castellano, ellos tienen el traductor para pasarte a vos a inglés.
¿Cómo no? Me pareció muy interesante la presentación de Bethany. Ahí planteaba en el chat que creo que es algo importante, es que esté bien comunicado para qué se convoca a los niños y jóvenes. Es decir, cuáles son los resultados esperados de esa participación.
Momento.
Y evaluar.
Is everyone seeing this translated into English?
Sorry.
No. ¿Puede poner su lengua en español? Raúl, would you mind explaining how to do that? Because we can't.
I mean, your Spanish is perfect.
No.
Lo que te está diciendo, Daniel, es si poner en tu Zoom, poner la lengua en español para que el sistema de traducción lo traduzca al inglés.
You go to where it says CC,
Anda
captions,
donde dice CC.
And you click the small up arrow.
Y
like
ahí
this.
tenés una flechita pequeña.
Así.
Así.
Mi lengua, I don't know what it is in Spanish. My speaking language, my caption language.
Bueno, es qué lengua tiene que capturar. En tu caso, vos tenés que poner español para que le pueda capturar y pasarle al inglés. Otherwise, what we can do is we can try to translate him simultaneously.
Okay.
So, te voy a traducir, Daniel, así evitamos más de pelotes. No sé cómo traducirlo eso, pero what Daniel is saying that it's important to consider the sense of the participation. When we invite children to participate, we have to have clear idea of what do we expect. So to have transparent rules in terms of how to involve children in these activities. Sigue adelante, Daniel.
Sí, y evaluar si somos capaces de ser coherentes con cumplir con las demandas que surgen de esa participación. Es decir,
And to
deja-
evaluate if we are coherent in terms of being able to respond with the demands associated with this participation. Seguí nomás.
dejando claro de entrada las limitaciones que tenemos para poder responder a todas las demandas. Esto que Bethany decía, restricciones, ¿no? Como mencionó en la exposición.
And to live in a clear manner the kind of restrictions and limitations that we have to respond to these demands. That has something that has been mentioned by Bethany in her presentation. Adelante, Daniel.
En todo caso, entiendo yo que debe intentarse completar el opinión y demandas, análisis conjunto y respuestas a los planteos realizados en un contexto de respeto mutuo.
In this sense, it is important to understand the requests and demands in a joint analysis in terms of providing a respectful response.
Y finalmente, comparto la preocupación para que la convocatoria a esa participación resulte efectiva. Esto es algo que muchas veces nos ocurre. Abrimos un espacio, habilitamos un espacio para esa participación, pero no siempre la convocatoria resulta efectiva, es decir, no siempre hay buena participación. Entonces, estaría bueno compartir ejemplos de cómo han logrado que los jóvenes, los niños y los jóvenes participen en forma activa.
And finally, what Daniel is saying is that it is important to establish clear rules in terms of the effectiveness of participation, because sometimes we open new spaces, but we don't have any clear result in terms of its effectiveness. So for this reason, what Daniel is suggesting is to share experiences in terms of bringing effective participation as a way of inspiration or learning. Gracias, Daniel. Thank you, Daniel.
And thank you, Raul, for the translation.
I'm not a robot.
Are you sure?
I'm not sure.
Audrey in the chat, she says, Danielle's points are key. To me, part of the challenge with our project is defining the goal of child participation. It looks like a child is participating with Audrey right now.
I
Yes.
am ready. This is Gaia. She remembers many of you from your visit to London.
Hello. This is a realistic participation.
Yes.
I have a comment.
Yeah, Audrey, should I keep going with your comment? Because I think it's a good question.
I'm happy to try and explain.
Yes.
So I think Danielle is hit the nail on the head with his points. To me, looking back at the proposal in the way it was written, we left the goal of child participation quite broad, and it's helpful to have a discussion about at what stage it would be helpful to have child participation. Is it in the early stage to kind of brainstorm priorities for policymakers to take forward, or is it for children to actually adjudicate on policymakers' proposals? Or both? I wonder what people think.
I wonder if this is a good time for the Ghanaian team to come in because they have planned their activities. Kwame, I don't know if you're in a space where you're able to talk right now, but are you able to respond to Audrey's question about whether you're using child participation to brainstorm priorities for policymakers to discuss, or is it more to talk about existing proposals? Not sure if you're able to come in right now. I know Kwame is doing training this week in the field, so it's possible he's not able to comment.
José María, vos levantaste la mano. ¿La bajaste?
Sí, hola, buenos días. Raúl, ¿me podrías traducir? Dos cositas iba a decir.
Okay. He wants to make a comment, Sarah.
Great.
Sí,
Adelante, José María.
ujú. Primero, me pareció muy interesante el tema de la interpretación, como si hay algún documento que hable sobre la interpretación o no, porque por ejemplo, acá tenemos un consejo de niñez donde básicamente, uno de los pilares que propone Laura Landi o Landi es el tema de la voz, pero el silencio es un dato a relevar. Entonces, ¿cómo podemos relevar ese silencio donde la acción es una forma de hablar y cómo no caer en una interpretación que sí o sí va a ser sesgada porque somos adultos, ¿no?
Dame
Esa
tiempo.
sería la pregunta.
Perfecto. Okay. José María is a colleague of us and is working in Mendoza City, Mendoza province. And what he's bringing to the discussion is the issue of interpretation. And in this case, what is saying that there is a problem on how do adults interpret children's voices, but we don't have ways to interpret when children are silent. So sometimes the silence is a way of expression, and we need also to understand that there are many other ways to express themselves beyond the verbal expression. So what he is also suggesting is some orientation, information, documents, just to understand the key issue of interpretation as something to take into account. Espero haber respondido a tu inquietud. Gracias, José María y equipo.
Beth, do you want to respond to that one?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's particularly a challenge with younger children, nonverbal children. There has to be a recognition of different forms of communication, and as much as possible, try to bring that in. And I think often we can't do everything ourselves, so it's about identifying um, the people who work, if there's a certain group of children that we want to reach, people who already have expertise in that area, who already work with that group of people, and finding ways of working alongside them. And I think, yeah, in lots of different situations, that is the best approach. I think back to the original point, that's why the prep work is absolutely essential, because you as a team need to know first of all, what your resource restrictions are, what your boundaries are, what are you able to do? And then looking at the broader framework, and and there are sort of things that are non-negotiable. Of course, it has to be safe, right? Of course, we have to be child friendly, and we have to make sure that children's voices are going somewhere, that has some influence. So those are the sort of bottom lines. And so then looking at so what can you achieve? What do you want to achieve within your plans? And then looking at what does that look like? Because you have to be clear before you are able to communicate that with children or other organizations that are going to support you in that. Yeah, sorry, I don't know if that answers your.
There's also two questions in the chat from Caro and Carolina about, and tell me if I understood correctly, about engaging with young children, because we're talking about primera infancia, very young children, some of whom don't speak yet. most of whom don't speak when they're very little. And how can you, is it appropriate to engage with them? If so, how can you? Because our project is about early childhood development. Carolina, did I summarize that okay?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, again, most of my experience has been with older children, but there's a sort of growing literature, and I will look for some articles and send them to you about how we how we include younger children. I think one thing is that again it's working through and with the people that are closest to them, so there'll be much more parent engagement and other professionals, but then also recognizing that children, even babies communicate, they cry when they're hungry, so uh, I guess articulating and finding ways of how do we how do we understand and uh, have some sort of understanding in terms of what they're trying to say, and then how can that be incorporated and in a way that we're able to record that, and that tells us something meaningful. So I will look. There's a couple of articles I can think of, but I don't know the name of right now, so I'll send them on. But again, we have to adapt all these things for the context. So there'd be a greater involvement, obviously, with parents, and probably with other professionals as well.
Could I also add, I see Carlos, you have your hand up, but this is specifically about the question of very young children. That in Ghana, because I'll speak for Ghana right now because I don't think they're able to join us right now. When they were developing their early childhood development policy, their national policy a few years ago, they, instead of engaging with very young children, which I think they possibly found too difficult or ethically difficult, I'm not sure, they engaged with older children, so school-age children, which they engaged through a contest, an art contest, to talk about what it was called Build Me a Future, and we can share a publication that talks about how they did that. They also made a video where children talked about priorities that were important to them, and that video was shown at a meeting of policymakers. And then the winners of the art contest, who were a bit older, I think maybe something like 13, 14, 15, they were they participated in the policy conference. So instead of engaging with very young children who were the targets of the policy, they went with older children. So there were still children participating. I don't know if you think that's a good way to do it, but it's also, I think it speaks to what Beth was saying at the beginning of the presentation. Some engagement with children is better than no engagement with children. And it doesn't have to be the perfect engagement. It's better to start somewhere. I think, Beth, would you agree that that's what you were saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And children who are slightly older than the children you're working with still have more experience, closer experience to being a younger child. So I think we're still gaining something. And yeah, as Sarah says, we start somewhere and we recognize that there are restrictions.
I think Carlos has a question
Yeah, I
or
have
comment.
more than I have two comments. One, a little bit kind of responding to the idea of when do we want children to participate. And I think we need to be careful, but we also need to be clear as to whether we are seeing this as a mechanistic element or as a kind of like a culture that we are trying to develop. Mechanistically, sometimes might be just that what is the ultimate output that we want from the children? Is it that they want us to comment in this particular policy or to revise this or to input here? And I think that might make us miss the potentiality of generating the culture of children engagement. And this is one of the things that I really like about what our Ghanaian colleagues have done. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that I think we have to also be open to the idea of searching for already existing spaces through which children participate already, not necessarily perhaps on health policy, but they participate in actually changing their environment. I mean, I put it, for instance, in my own experience as a child in Latin America. Being involved in the Scouts, I was very strongly involved in a lot of ecological activities around where I lived. And I was in the Cubs, so I must have been like 7 or 8, but I was participating and arguing with so many different people around how we were keeping the health of our gardens and our little kind of park in front of our house. And likewise with the church. I mean, I was part of the catechist kind of like group, and I was trying to bring more children into. So you see already systems through which children participate. And what sometimes we need just to do is just to make those two systems kind of start talking to one another, which I think, for instance, what I find very creative of what they have done, our colleagues in Ghana, is that sometimes just a simple medium like a video where you are showcasing the voice, you are creating that space, providing the voice and stimulating the influence. You can just make those two things talk to one another versus try to think of like, okay, we need to create this a new system completely independent of what everything exists so that they can talk about policies, etc. Over.
Yeah, just to say, I completely agree with that. There are spaces where children are, where they are more comfortable, they're safe, and working within those systems is often much more effective than trying to create them. So I think, yeah, those existing spaces that you have been able to identify could be key to. I guess it's then being just very clear about what are the asks, what are you taking to them, and making sure that is very clear in terms of the and I think the mechanism and the cultural piece, that's very, very important. But they in many ways should work together, right? Like by being able to show that we have a specific mechanism that's being used to influence something specific, we're creating a culture that says these children's voices are important, and this is something that is integrated in everything that we do. Thank you. I think that's really helpful. Raul, do you have your?
Yes. First of all, Bethany, thanks so much for your presentation. It was both inspiring and also a way to express our concern and interest of this topic. Just to let you know, as you know, we created a group on child participation during the UK. So there's an integrated group by the 3 organizations participating in the project. So this is an important issue. In Argentina, during our presentation in London, we showed that our interdisciplinary group started to debate around child participation. We know the Lundy model. We agree with this model. And we have also many questions. For example, the age question that has been raised many times here on how do we consider child participation with the life course approach. Considering that first, the project itself is based on early child development. So we should consider one manner or another early stages of life. And for this reason, we need to consider the best way to get the voices of the children, although they don't speak, but perhaps through their activities, the way they play, they socialize, and the participation of the caregivers could be good sources of messages of this activity along the life course. The second issue is that we know that at each municipal level, there are activities of child participation. Our question is, how to reinforce those activities. We don't want to impose, and we are very respectful of what each municipality is doing. But we need to think this with an overall perspective in terms of thinking this as a project at the Argentinian level, but also at both country levels. So this, I don't want a response right now, but just I'm sharing some of our concerns. The other issue has to do with, well, I mentioned already, the audience. And this is very extremely important in terms of trying to understand the willingness to listen children. And what I see, based on your examples, is that for the case of Scotland, Ireland, or the UK specifically, there is a high level of willingness to listen to children. And perhaps this is also another cultural issue that has to do with how democracy has been built, and the space of children within each society. This is just, I would like to know also if it's possible, which were the countries that have participated in the global study, because you mentioned that there are 10 countries. And so I would like to see if they are representatives of the diversity of the world, because 10 countries is not global. So in particular, if there is any Latin American country participating of this endeavor, as well as the global threat assessment tool. Just to let you know, as something that happened today, it was published in the newspaper. There is an agreement between a famous newspaper and UNICEF, considering the threat of children through internet and all kind of abuses and bullying and cyberbullying, all this stuff. Just to let you know that this is a problem, a very huge problem for us. So just as a coincidence, based on what you have mentioned. And I hope that we will go deep in a deep manner with this kind of discussions at the country level, but also as a project. Thanks so much.
Thank you. It's great to hear the work that's happening, and you're obviously, starting to build and have lots of, really important questions. In terms of the example I gave, the countries included Zimbabwe, India, Australia, Poland, Ghana, Canada, Nepal, Madagascar, Colombia, which I think is the closest, and Uganda, Nigeria. So it's quite a diverse range. We work with Red Papas in Colombia quite closely. They've done they do a lot of participatory work. But yeah, an older group. I mean, I guess that's the groundwork and the understanding is there in terms of your part. I guess it's Audrey's specific question that's quite important in terms of at what points do you want to bring child participation in? I think being realistic and understanding that, that it can't be a complete child participation project at this point. There's you have restrictions that you know very well. And so choosing an activity or a piece of work to include. And I think that is a powerful message that talking about challenging sort of cultures of maybe not listening to children, not involving them. When we're able to create, that's an example, that's what's going to shift culture ultimately. And so, yeah, not to minimize all the challenges, but I think that's why it's choosing. So what is that point at which you're going to involve children for this project? What are the parameters in which you're going to work? Who do you want to work with? Who's going to be involved in that? And then start working from there. So there is a sort of time limited. There's a group of there's some sort of restrictions in terms of what you're going to do and the plans that you make. and like you said, the Ghana model was so effective because it was very simple. It was going to groups that already existed, and then it was doing an activity that children enjoyed that showcased something, and then it was taking that to policymakers as so in many ways it was a very simple model of doing things, but highly effective because of that. So I guess maybe that's the next step, as is just at what point, who, and those sort of steps. Sorry, I'm babbling, and I also I'm aware that I don't know the details of your specific project, so that's just my sort of broader
Not babbling.
I wonder for this space, because we have, 15 minutes, if it would be helpful, because obviously, the main decisions aren't going to be made now, but would it be helpful for you as a group to decide those, like what are the top three questions that need to be answered, and sort of how are they, how are you going to move those forward? I don't know, Sarah, would that be a useful exercise or
Yeah, or to brainstorm any existing structures that already could be tapped into, sort of per Carlos's comment. Or do you want to share any ideas that you have, or if they're more than ideas, maybe they're plans? Um, Raul, do you
Okay. Uh, I don't know if you had a chance to see the document that we presented on child participation. That is a result of the work of our group, and we share some of the concerns uh, regarding how to involve children at different stages of life. This is one of the issues. The other issue has to do with how to integrate these different experiences into a more comprehensive way that is coherent with the sense of the project. Well, we try also to find out the best model that can fit this idea, and we understand that it is very important to move from the hard model to the Lundi one, because it's more comprehensive in terms of analyzing the contextual factors that are influencing the child participation. And we understand that it's time for debate, for discussion, to clarify these ideas and to work together with the municipalities in terms of reinforcing and systematizing what they are doing and how to integrate these efforts into the goals of the project. A la gente de los municipios, si tiene algún comentario o alguna pregunta caliente sobre el tema de participación que hemos discutido en el grupo que trabajó, si tienen alguna reflexión para compartir. De a uno, por favor. I'm asking to the members of the group if they have any comment or reflection to do based on our previous discussions. It seems that there are no comments. But again, and we need to consider this process from the very beginning. We should not put child participation just at the very end as something that is not relevant. So this is a very key and important issue. What is good for us is that there are ongoing experiences everywhere in each municipality. There are different ports of entrance for child participation, but perhaps what we need is just more integration and more work with each municipality in terms of considering this as a key issue within the context of the project.
Has there been, sorry. Has there been any sort of mapping exercise of what that looks like and how? Yeah. So sorry.
What kind of mapping?
So one of the things, and I realize that the space I work in at the moment is very different, but one of the first things we did was looking at, who's working in this area, what are they doing, how effective are they, and so like you're saying that these different groups are doing things at different levels.
Yeah.
I mean, is
Within
there
this
sort of a mapping of what that looks like?
we call this mapping situation analysis, and this is something that each municipality has done, and they are all finished their exercise, and we know what each sector is doing, and within their activities, where is participation. If this is something that belongs to one sector, there are many sectors involved in participatory activities. So this is now an ongoing process, and we will start next February, March, and part of April with workshops at the municipal level to analyze the results of the situation analysis as the point of departure of the plan of action for each municipality. Within these activities, child participation will have an important role.
Can I come in a second? Thanks, Beth and Raul. This is a really, really important discussion. I think you're putting your finger on the fact that the child participation work might not be external to the intersectoral policymaking intervention, but might be a part of it, which is, and that's more my stupidity than anything else. I had not quite realized when thinking about the proposal, because in the proposal, it looked like it was going to be external. It was going to be, people doing focus group discussions and maybe creative activities with children as part of the research project, but not actually some activity to strengthen what municipalities are already doing, which is what it sounds you're thinking about, Raul, or the team is considering. Is that correct?
That's
Quite
correct.
different, yeah.
Yeah, totally correct.
And I mean, that sounds like a perfect place to start, right? We always want to work with existing structures and encourage those and document them, I think is something that's very important. And particularly understanding children's experiences of them. How have they found those systems? Do they feel that they are being given a safe space and voice and so yeah, I think that's hugely important.
Perhaps what we will have to do is to rethink child participation within this project in terms of trying to gather all the pieces of this puzzle to see what Audrey is mentioning now and to qualify the participation, who is doing what, how the participatory activities are responding to contribute to the intersectorality process, because perhaps they already are contributing and we don't know. We have to visualize this within the lenses of the project. How is the life course approach considered? Because our group is extremely concerned based on the professional profiles of our members with early stages of life. And I think that this is a very important contributions that we can make in this field. Understanding that this is a sequence, there is a process of child participation. There is an expression on how people build their citizenship. And I think that this is a good example on how can we start to build citizenship since early stages of life and consider children as what they are, subjects of rights. So an infant, a newborn, they have the rights as any a grown-up person. So the point is that they don't have the means and that we don't have the tools in terms of recognizing their rights and to make them real.
Great, thank you. Sarah, is there anything else that would be helpful to ask or discuss right now in just 5 minutes or
Yes, we have just 5 minutes remaining, but maybe we have your presentation was so rich and has given us so much food for thought that I think that we have plenty of material. While others are thinking of any last questions that you might want to ask or anything you want to share with Beth, Beth, would you be willing to share your presentation with us so that we could
yeah,
get those resources? Excellent. And we can circulate it to everyone who's on the call.
yeah, and I'll look for the article I'm thinking of younger children and participation as well.
¿Alguna pregunta o comentario final de nuestro grupo?
Okay.
De mi
Oh,
parte,
sorry.
Daniel,
Daniel.
adelante.
no, dije, de mi parte nada más agradecer la posibilidad de compartir esto con el grupo de UCL. Así que agradecidos y bueno, es un desafío enorme esto de abrir instancias de participación, sobre todo con los niños más pequeños, ver cómo se puede concretar eso. Pero muy agradecido.
He thanks very much for this opportunity and just to open this space and to think about how to involve children since early stages of life in the participatory processes. José María.
Gracias, Daniel.
Sí. Yo agradecer mucho por este nuevo modelo que no lo conocía y que me gustaría mucho poder estudiar. Y vamos a estar esperando ansiosos la presentación, si es posible, para poder indagar las preguntas y el material. Eso sería. Gracias, Raúl.
Okay. He wants also to thank you for your presentation. He wants to learn more about the Lundi model. And also he's extremely anxious. I know that he's anxious to receive your presentation because the group wants to study and to understand more deeply all the information that you are going to share. Caro.
Hola a todos. ¿Se escucha, Raúl? Porque no puedo hablar más fuerte.
Perfecto.
Bueno, gracias. Muchas gracias por la presentación. Yo desde Argentina estoy en el área de participación infantil y estamos trabajando mucho para poder hablar y reflexionar sobre la participación infantil y que sea genuina. Ese creo que es el mensaje principal, que realmente tengamos una escucha genuina, sobre todo con la primera infancia, que es lo que más nos cuesta pensar. Leímos el paper de Ghana, no sé si Raúl querés hacer un stop para poder
Sí, pues ya lo
pasar
tuyo se está transformando ya en una novela.
y bueno.
Okay. Now, what Caro is saying that first she wants to thank also for your presentation, Bethany, and she really valued this space. And she also wants to express her concerns, considering that she particularly is working in the field of child participation, particularly with young kids. And her concern has to do on how to promote genuine participation. And this is a key issue that she is highlighting. Adelante, Caro.
Y básicamente que está bueno compartir a medida que avancemos la información y podamos trabajar en equipo. Así que gracias.
It will be important also to establish a follow-up process, to share all what we are doing and to see how can we learn from each other. And she thanks again for this activity.
Wonderful. If there are thank you, Caro, thank you everyone for those kind words, and I'm glad this was stimulating, and we will have many follow-up discussions. In fact, I think we're planning a working group to take this forward, and we can get into all of the details. In the meantime, if no one has anything further to add, I suggest that we say thank you to Beth for joining us, give her a round of applause, and say that we will continue these discussions in the very near future. So thank you so much, Beth. We really appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.
Adiós a todos.
Adios.
Adiós.
Arroz.
Chao, chao.
Chao.